Hello, I'm Jackie Barrie, author of Experiential Speaking, and I'm here today talking to Rebecca Jones, known as the Red Shoe Bizwoman. And what she does is motivational business speaking. She's a mentor and trainer, and her aim is to empower people who wish to grow in their abilities and improve the businesses they run or lead. And she's often called upon to speak at conferences with a no-nonsense and fun approach to business and an easygoing style that beats traditional methods any day. So, of course, Rebecca was one of the people I turned to when I was writing my book, and she gave me an example that's featured on page 176. It says, in her talk about diversity or lack of it, Rebecca Jones asks things like, stand up if you have pets, sit down if it's your first pet, and repeats it with topics such as live in a flat, have a degree, etc. If the group seems to be up for fun, she does it faster and faster with more and more silly questions. Her aim is to show people how diverse the group is because everyone's an individual. So over to Rebecca. Tell me a bit more about how you use that icebreaker and energizer, and what kind of results you get. How does it work for you? How do audiences respond when you do that with them?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Jackie. I mean, one of the questions that I often have from conference organisers is how we're going to keep them interested, how we're going to get them engaged. A lot of the time when I'm doing sort of in-house conferences for clients, they've already had, 4 or 5 people speak before me, probably the CEO and the, finance person and all of that. So what we need to do is really change the energy in the room. And as you know, a lot of my work is around innovation and enterprise and getting people to think differently. And one of the things I know we need to do with that is to get people, their minds and their brains, to think differently about opportunities and activities. And so often I'll do something which they're just not really expecting. So definitely jumping up and down is something they don't really expect. And, I work with all sorts of organisations. You can see them looking at me like, oh, okay. And initially, maybe the audience aren't keen about doing it. But if I giggle and join in with them and have fun with them, they will. People will let their hair down. You'll be quite surprised who I can manage to get to join in.
I think that's really interesting, actually. It is a lot to do with the energy of the speaker, will be how you get the audience to respond and how they overcome that change from sitting passively in their chairs to actively engaging in the content. But my point in the book, and I'm sure your point as well, is always that there has to be a reason to do it. There has to be a learning outcome. So in your example of the stand up, sit down, you're making a point about diversity, which is you're only going to use that exercise when that's a link to your topic.
Well, interestingly, actually, I use it in all sorts of situations because, of course, you can just change the questions. It doesn't have to be diversity. So, for example, when we're looking at innovation in the workplace, I'll use questions like, have you ever thought of a new idea for this? Or have you ever considered that? Or does it ever frustrate you when? And get people to stand up, sit down then, because actually what we're trying to get them to realise is their brains already do think like that, because often people will say, oh no, I'm not this or I'm not that. So what we're trying to get them to see is actually we're looking for a series of traits often in people. We're looking for different experiences, and it's those different experiences I'm trying to bring to the fore. So I don't mind, whether or not you've got some of them but not all of them. So that's what we're trying to do. So yeah, no, I do use it in different situations, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I do too. And stand up, sit down is so much more interesting than hands up. No one puts their hands up very high or keeps it there very long, and it doesn't get energy and blood flow in the room like standing up and sitting down does.
No. And you find that, if they're really up for it and you can go for it and you can make it into a bit of fun, then they will start laughing and joining in, and you can see them all giggling, and somebody will stand up and they go, oh, no, I'm not that, and then they sit back down and you think, really, it's not that serious, So yeah,
a bit of fun in the workplace. I'm all for that, and people learn more when they're laughing, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So what other activities or icebreakers are your favourites? What do you use most commonly?
Yeah, I think anyone who's seen me speak, when I do a lot of the work I do around mindset and shifting mindset, will know that I use mindset cards, and these are huge, big sort of cards that I get audience members to come up on the stage and stand there and hold the cards, and then as I'm describing it, they lift up different cards. So one is a card that's, you know, I don't really want to join in with this activity. One is I love joining in, I'm happy. And one is that I don't really care either way. And so I get them to do sort of like gestures and movements. And again, depending on the audience and how much fun they're willing to have, as to how much silliness we can have with it. But really, the serious element about it is for us to understand that actually we transition through different feelings and emotions in the workplace. So when we ask people to join in and do things, or, you know, can you just do this project? And people will say, no, that's not something I can do. It's not necessarily they're being difficult or awkward. What we're looking at is, you know, is it that their mindset at that moment is, oh, I don't think I can do that. So I'm trying to teach them that we can alter our mindset depending on different situations, but by doing it in a very visual way, with members of their team on the stage. And, you know, I tend to time and time again end up with the joker, says that I'll do it for you, you know, and then, you know, so you can joke with them and you can say, oh, you're trying to steal my thunder, this is my show, you know, and then push them back off the stage. And but I mean, I always say to people, don't get, you know, I mean, I do big conference speaking, as you know, Jackie, and don't get people onto the stage if you're not that comfortable with that, because you don't know what they're going to do. So you just have to roll with it. So yeah, it's a bit of fun. It is a bit of fun.
You're right. Any kind of audience interaction can derail you as the speaker, because it's out of your control as soon as you get them involved. So that leads to another question really about you're introducing fun and silliness and audience participation at that level. How do you frame that for the audience when if they're in an expectation of sitting there looking at bullet point slides? How do you introduce these different activities that you're going to do?
Okay, I think people realise within the first 2 minutes they're not going to get that. So yeah, I don't have bullet point slides. I only have some slides and they're very much visual things. Usually by the time I've done the first couple of minutes, people realise, okay, this is going to be, you know, yeah, yes, it's serious, it has got information in it, but she's going to do this in a fun way and it's going to be okay to laugh. So we have to almost give the audience permission to laugh. So in a way, the first sort of joke, I don't call them jokes, they're stories that are funny, and my stories are positioned in such a way that if you laugh, that's great. If you don't, it doesn't matter, I just carry on. So I'm not like telling a stand-up joke and if nobody laughs it's like tumbleweed moment, so we don't do that. That's dangerous. But you know, I sort of set it up that this is going to be okay for you to respond, it's okay for you to join in, it's going to be okay for you to laugh, because I'm going to laugh with you. I always laugh at myself anyway, so yeah.
And that is a really good tip actually, that the best kind of humour is self-deprecating.
Yeah.
Rather than making someone else the butt of the joke.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful though, because there's a balance here between self-deprecation that's kind of funny and putting yourself down where the audience now feels uncomfortable on your behalf, you know. And I think we've all seen people do that when they're nervous speaking at an event and they start saying, oh, I'm not very good at this, and they're fumbling around, and we feel really awkward for them. So we can't do that. We need to make sure the audience don't feel awkward on our behalf, but that they know this is okay. And I think, you know, everything from the way you arrive on the stage, everything about the way you look, all has something to do with it. Because, look, if I arrived completely suited and booted, you would probably go, I'm not sure, you know, this is confusing now. She's funny, but you know, she's got a really black suit on, white shirt, and no. So we have to balance it all the time, and know when it's not appropriate as well.
Yes, it leads to my next question actually. Like me, I'm sure you've been in the audience at many events. Yeah. What kind of icebreakers and energizers and games have you had to take part in that did work and that made a memorable point for you, or that didn't work?
I always sort of worry about when they say turn to the person next to you, and I think, oh no, they're going to completely lose us now. So if I haven't really spoken to the person next to me before, it'll either go really well or not very well at all. And the not very well at all for me is the fact that actually we get on really well and we just chat, and now you can't get me back into your talk. So I always think that for me as an audience member, if you do that quite early on, that loses the momentum of the talk. So I'm quite cautious about that for people. I always think, oh, please don't do that. Things that work. I suppose I will join in with things that are silly on the whole, unless I think you're making fun of me. And then I think, I'm not sure I want to do that. Does that make sense?
Can you think of an example of that?
Oh, no, that's so funny, isn't it? But I think sometimes when they do the whole, touch your nose and put your hand, for me, maybe I've seen them too many times. I don't know. I mean, that's the trouble.
That is another risk, isn't it? That so many speakers are doing the same thing. And as an audience member, you might experience it more than once. And the first time is generally the time that you're going to remember and credit that speaker with the idea. If everyone copies everybody else, then it's not going to work for anybody.
And I think this is where it's probably not fair for me to say that, because, I sit in a disproportionately high amount of conferences. I don't think many people other than speakers do that, do they? I think the only other person probably is the sound and techie people. So,
and they're probably not listening, let's be honest.
No, they always say they don't particularly listen because they don't really understand,
So they're just trying to get the levels right, which is the important proper thing.
Yeah, it is difficult, I think. And I think you have to I think my top tip would probably be that you have to feel comfortable with it. And if you feel comfortable with what you're doing, the audience feels safe with you. So then it's okay. So sometimes when I feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's probably because I think, I'm not sure you know where this is going.
That's a really good piece of advice, actually. Is there anything else that you would say to speakers and presenters who are considering using audience activities in their talk and perhaps haven't practiced it or as much as the likes of you and me?
Yeah, well, definitely practice it. And I think, I was very fortunate. I came up through the sort of background of being a trainer and a lecturer at universities and things like that first. So I had loads of time sort of stood at the front of groups of people where I would try things out, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work because it's just a small group of people and you can have a laugh. And, I always say to people, oh, that was a guinea pig moment. Sorry about that. That didn't work. But when you're on a big stage with hundreds of people, that, to me, in my mind, that's not the time to practice it. So I always try things out in small groups, so workshops or master classes. That's when I'll try a new activity out. And until I know it works, most of the time, I don't think I'd use it on a big stage.
And generally, on a big stage with a big audience, the expectation is the person on stage will tell great stories or use great visuals or be an entertainment. As where in a training room setting, it's not so much why to do something, it's how to do something. And there are many more practical applications that the participants can engage in.
Exactly.
But I do think there's a continuum, there's a blend, and there are certain things you can do with a room full of 1,000 people that maybe have drawn from the training room. And
definitely.
The other point that you make in this conversation, I think, is also valid. Even trainers, there are a lot of trainers using exercises that don't have a point.
Probably, yeah. That's called time filling.
Well, they just know they've been trained somehow to say, oh, we must have an energizer after lunch. And so they throw one in, but it's not one that fits in the context of the day. And therefore, the audience will generally go along with it because audiences are generally obedient, but they won't actually benefit from that investment in their time and energy.
Yeah, and I think, that's where you have to almost have this, additional sense about you as a trainer and as a speaker, that you're picking up on those vibes of this isn't really sitting very well with this audience, or it doesn't work there, and it's that experience that my clients now are getting the value of, if you like. So I've just been doing a series of events for a client now, and one of the activities that they wanted to do, I just said to them, there was absolutely no way we should do that before lunch, because that we're then letting them go to lunch with that in their heads, and we've not given them the solution. We can either do it you know, before lunch, but we've got to give them the answers, or we've got to put it after lunch. So this is just about knowledge and experience of knowing what does and doesn't work. I mean, I'm not saying it's always perfect, but it's the best you can do, isn't it, is pull on those experiences.
Going back to your point about fun and silliness, that's clearly congruent with your personality. You can't force somebody who doesn't already enjoy that genuinely into saying, well, this is the best way to present. So that's all wrapped up with what you were saying about turning up on stage looking congruent, because a serious business suit doesn't go with that bit of your personal brand. And that goes into the red, which you'll notice I am wearing in your honour today.
Oh, bless you.
The red shoe business woman. So I don't want to wrap up prematurely, but if people want to find out more about you and what you do, where do they go?
So yeah, the website, which is just rebeccajones.biz, so rebeccajones.biz, and yeah, everything is from there onwards. Or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter if you like. But I think for me, the red shoes obviously is still the brand that everyone knows me as, although I do all sorts of other different things. It's the brand, and you know, yeah, it's very important for me that that's part of what we talk about when I'm on the stage, is the fact that for me it's an element of fun, but there's an element of seriousness in both my branding and the way in which I sort of explain who I am and what I do. So yeah, I suppose you're right about the fun and silliness. It's got to be coming from the right place, and if it's not you, it's not naturally you, then don't do it, but do something that audiences can feel they can join in with.
So it's all tied together, the look and feel of your brand, how you deliver it, how the fit is working with your message, with your audience, with your client. And when you get all those things right, it makes you a better speaker because your audience gets a better experience.
I think so, yeah. And I think, you know, for me, that's where I position myself in a conference, is that, you know, although I've got serious information, it's done in a fun way. So people can use that then to break up their conference program, if you like. And I think that's really important, that we are all offering different things so conference organisers can have their program to suit what they need.
And it's all stuff that helps you stand out, and therefore you get more bookings.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I know that my style is going to suit some conferences and not others, and I already know that, and that's fine. So I'm not trying to suit everybody, and I think that's where it's just much easier for me, because I'm not trying to suit everyone, you know. And there have been occasions where I've spoken to an organizer of a conference and said, I just don't think I suit, you know, and I think I'm just being really honest and saying, I just don't think I'm for your audience, you know. So I think it's knowing where you fit.
One last question then. When you're in the conversation with a prospective client and they're talking about booking you for their event, what's your strategy or technique for introducing the idea of, by the way, you do know I'm not a standard speaker that's just going to talk. I'm going to be doing this and that thing with your audience. How do you get them to buy in?
Well, to be fair, most people have already seen videos, so they already know what it's going to be a bit like. And you know, if somebody's interested, I will send them additional videos, which has given them I'll give them you know, if they're interested in booking me, I'll give them the video with the start to finish, so they see the whole thing. They know how it all links together. And I don't want people to go away thinking that I'm just constantly silly, because, you know, in a 45-minute talk, you probably find there's about 2 or 3 elements that are just good old-fashioned fun. And the rest is all content. So I think it's, you know, very few people are put off by it. I think some will sort of ask me to maybe not say certain things, because I am known for being, you know, quite blunt. And they'll say, oh, maybe that'll be too much for our audience, but when you do the workshop, that would be great, because that's different, because you've got a different relationship then. So yeah, it's just feeling your way through, I guess.
Well, thank you for those insights. That's really useful.
You're welcome.